Hey there. Welcome to Midnight Sleep Crime. I'm here to help you relax tonight. I know many of you use this video to fall asleep. So, before you get cozy, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to hear from you. Story 1. The Hollow Creek Murders. Premise. In the misty mountain town of Hollow Creek, a series of disappearances gripped the community. Every few months, a buried time capsule is unearthed deep in the woods, each one containing photos, trinkets, and letters belonging to people who haven't gone missing yet. As investigators dig deeper, they realize the killer is documenting his crimes before they even happen, and the next capsule might already contain someone they know. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn, leaving Hollow Creek coated in a cold, silvery mist. The mountain town, nestled deep in the Carolina woods, always seemed to wear this kind of weather like a second skin, quiet, ghostly, as if it preferred to hide its secrets behind fog. Deputy Mara Collins parked her cruiser at the end of the gravel trail leading into Black Hollow Park, where a group of early joggers and dog walkers had gathered around the old picnic clearing. Their faces were pale, eyes fixed on the muddy ground near a row of decaying oak trees. The call had come in just after 6 a.m. Something's been dug up out here. Looks like a box. Wooden. Old. Mara tightened her rain jacket, stepped out into the chill, and immediately caught the scent of damp earth mixed with something faintly metallic, like rust. She pushed through the cluster of onlookers until she saw it. A small wooden chest, about the size of a shoebox, half buried in a patch of dark soil. The lid was carved with a simple cross, its grooves filled with mud and water. "Who found it?" she asked, her voice calm but clipped. A bearded man in a neon running vest raised his hand nervously. "My dog did. He was digging, by that big oak, and I thought he hit a squirrel's nest or something. Then I saw the lid." Mara crouched beside the box, brushing away dirt with her gloved fingers. The wood was soft with age, rotted around the edges, but the nails holding it shut looked new, too new. She straightened up and keyed her radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I need forensics at Black Hollow Park, near the South Trail. Possible evidence container. Advise Detective Brooks." The dispatcher's voice crackled back. "Copy that, Unit 12. Brooks en route." Mara stood, hands on her belt, eyes scanning the tree line. The fog was thick enough to blur the outlines of the forest into vague shapes. Some human, some not. She'd been stationed in Hollow Creek for 5 years and had seen her fair share of weird, isolated finds, old deer traps, abandoned tools, once even a buried suitcase full of stolen watches. But this felt different. The craftsmanship, the deliberate placement, the timing, it all felt too intentional. She turned when she heard tires crunching on gravel. A black unmarked SUV rolled up, and Detective Caleb Brooks stepped out, coffee in one hand, notepad in the other. "Morning," he said flatly. He was a big man, early 40s, hair starting to gray at the temples, with the weary look of someone who'd seen too many crime scenes before breakfast. "What do we got?" Mara gestured toward the box. "Found buried less than a foot deep. Still sealed." Brooks crouched beside it, examining the cross. "Looks homemade. Not weathered enough to have been here long." He tapped the nail heads lightly with a pen. "These are standard roofing nails. Home Depot variety." He sighed, set his coffee down, and motioned to one of the crime techs unloading gear from their van. "All right, let's get photos, soil samples, the usual. Don't open it until we're set up." Mara watched as the techs marked the area with yellow flags and began their slow, methodical sweep. She could feel something tightening in her gut, the same instinct she'd had 3 years ago when they found that body by the quarry. Brooks noticed. "You thinking the same thing I am?" "I'm thinking it's not some kid's time capsule," Mara said quietly. He nodded once. "Yeah. Me too." An hour later, after the perimeter was secured, Brooks knelt beside the wooden chest with a pair of latex gloves. A tech aimed their camera over his shoulder as he used a small crowbar to gently pry open the lid. The nails resisted for a moment, then gave way with a sharp crack. The smell hit first, not rot, but old paper and faint mildew. Inside was a layer of neatly folded objects, a photograph, a locket, and what looked like a journal page, yellowed but intact. Brooks reached for the photo first. It showed a young woman, maybe 20, standing in front of Hollow Creek's old post office, smiling, holding a cup of coffee. The photo wasn't damaged. It looked new. Mara frowned. That looks like it was taken this year. Brooks turned it over. Written on the back in black ink. Marissa Hale. April 17, 2022. He looked up sharply. That's last year. The name stirred something in Mara's memory. Wait, Marissa Hale? She went missing last May, didn't she? Brooks nodded grimly. College student. Disappeared after a shift at the diner. No trace. He set the photo down and picked up the locket. A small gold heart, tarnished but clean. Inside was another picture, the same woman, younger this time, maybe high school age. Finally, he unfolded the journal page. It was torn from a spiral notebook, written in blocky handwriting. Buried on time. She smiled when I told her it was for the future. The air went still. Mara's voice was low. You think this was hers? Brooks stared at the page. No. I think it was his. By noon, the site had been cordoned off and the evidence bagged. Word spread fast through the small town. Reporters showed up at the park entrance, shouting questions about a possible new lead in the Hale disappearance. Brooks brushed past them without comment, his face set like stone. Back at the station, in the small, wood-paneled evidence room, he laid the box's contents out on the table. This was found about a quarter-mile from where Marissa's car was discovered, he said. We combed that area last year and didn't find anything. Mara flipped through the case file. So either we missed it, or it wasn't there yet. Brooks gave her a look. Exactly. He pointed to the photo. If this was buried recently, someone dug it in intentionally. Someone who wanted it to be found. Why now? That's the question. He rubbed his temple, then leaned back. Let's pull her file again. See if anything new jumps out. Timeline, last known contacts, social media. I want everything. Mara nodded. And the handwriting? Forensics is running it through the database. But if this is connected to Hale's disappearance, we might be dealing with a serial case. She swallowed hard. You mean, there could be more boxes? He didn't answer. That night, long after the station lights had dimmed, Mara sat alone at her desk scrolling through old Hollow Creek newspaper archives. The story of Marissa Hale's disappearance had gripped the town. Bright college student, vanished after closing up the diner where she worked. Her car was found parked neatly in front of her apartment, keys still in the ignition. No signs of struggle. No useful fingerprints. And now, a year later, her photo and belongings had surfaced inside a buried chest. She clicked to another article, an older one, dated 5 years back. Headline: Local teen missing after hiking trip, search suspended. The name jumped out at her, Danielle Pratt. Missing from the same region. She scrolled further. The details matched too closely. Personal items missing, no leads, search abandoned. An idea began forming, slow and dreadful. What if there had been other boxes, buried years apart, waiting to be found? She typed time capsule into the local archives search bar, and froze when a headline popped up from 2008. Children discover unusual box in woods. Police dismiss as prank. She opened it. The photo showed 2 kids holding up what looked like another small wooden chest, same cross carved on top. The article mentioned it contained photographs of unidentified young women and a torn letter, but police had ruled it harmless. Mara exhaled sharply. No way. She grabbed her phone and called Brooks. He picked up on the second ring, his voice thick with fatigue. Yeah, you need to see this. There was another box. 17 years ago. He didn't respond right away. Then, email me the article. I'll be there in 10. When Brooks arrived, he studied the faded newspaper image closely. Same design. Same size. That's not coincidence. He leaned back, expression darkening. If this guy's been doing this since 2008, that's almost 2 decades of buried boxes. And if the pattern holds, Mara added quietly, there'll be another one soon. Brooks looked at the date on the first box's label again, April 17, 2022. Then at the one from the article, June 4th, 2008. He did some quick math. 14 years apart. But Hale went missing last year, right after this date. That means the box might have been buried before she disappeared. Mara's voice dropped. So he's planning them? Looks that way. Brooks stared down at the photo of Marissa Hale, her smile frozen forever in black and white. We're not dealing with a killer who hides his crimes. We're dealing with someone who predicts them. The next morning, Hollow Creek woke up to headlines screaming about the discovery. The local Facebook groups were in chaos. Theories about cults, serial killers, government cover-ups. At 9:12 a.m., the police department's front desk phone rang. The receptionist answered, listened, then stood up pale as paper. "It's for Detective Brooks," she said quietly. "They said they found another box." Brooks was already grabbing his coat. "Where?" "Near the Old Mill Road. Just outside town." He exchanged a grim look with Mara. "Let's move." They arrived 15 minutes later to find two construction workers waiting by a patch of disturbed soil next to the half-demolished mill. The box was smaller this time, metal instead of wood, but unmistakable and again freshly buried. Brooks crouched, brushed off the dirt, and frowned. There was a note taped to the lid, scrawled in the same handwriting as before. "You're looking in the wrong year." Mara's breath caught. What the hell does that mean? Brooks didn't answer. He was staring at the faint engraving on the metal lid, the same small cross. But below it, etched into the surface, was something new. A date, April 19th, 2025. 2 days from now. The metal box sat under the harsh glow of the evidence lab lights, its wet soil crusted along the edges like dried blood. The engraved date, April 19th, 2025, gleamed faintly through the smudges. Detective Caleb Brooks stood over it with arms crossed, a grim scowl creasing his weathered face. Every cop in Hollow Creek PD knew that look. It was the one he wore when instinct told him the situation was worse than it appeared. Deputy Mara Collins entered the lab holding 2 coffees, the steam curling into the sterile air. "You've been staring at that box for an hour," she said quietly. Brooks didn't look up. "This date isn't random." She placed the coffees down and leaned against the table. "Could be the next burial date. Or an anniversary." He shook his head. "No." The message said, "You're looking in the wrong year." He tapped the lid with a gloved finger. If the killer buried Marissa Hale's box a year before she vanished, this could be the same thing. Maybe it's a warning about something that hasn't happened yet. Mara frowned. "You think he's predicting another disappearance?" Brooks finally turned to her. "I think he's planning it." By late morning, the conference room had filled with maps, photos, and evidence charts. A projector hummed in the corner, casting the image of the engraved date onto the wall. Brooks addressed the small team of detectives and forensic specialists. "We have 2 confirmed boxes, one wooden, one metal. Both buried in the Hollow Creek area. Both containing items linked to missing women. The most recent was found yesterday with this date, April 19th, 2025. 2 days from now." He pointed to the board, where 2 photographs were pinned side by side. Marissa Hale, the missing college student, and Danielle Pratt, the teen from the 2008 case. Both women vanished in April, Brooks continued. Both around the same week of the month. Both linked to locations within 3 miles of each other. Mara spoke up from her seat. "So the killer operates on a cycle, a specific window of time." "Exactly," Brooks said. "We believe he prepares these boxes ahead of time, buries them as a kind of," he hesitated, "ritual? A countdown before the next victim." Someone in the back muttered, "That's sick." Brooks nodded grimly. "Yeah, but it gives us something we've never had before." After the briefing, Brooks and Mara drove out to the mill site again. The sky was overcast, the kind of dull gray that made the woods feel endless. 2 days, Mara said as they parked by the yellow tape. "You really think he's going to strike again?" Brooks stared at the tree line. "If he's kept this pattern for years, I'd bet on it." They walked the perimeter in silence for a while, the wet earth squishing under their boots. Birds were quiet, too quiet. "Look at this," Mara said suddenly, crouching near a rusted chain-link fence. A trail of faint boot prints led away from the burial spot, disappearing into the woods. Brooks knelt beside her. Heavy tread. Work boots. She glanced at him. Construction workers? Maybe. Or someone pretending to be one. They followed the tracks for about 30 yards until the forest thickened. The path ended abruptly at a small clearing littered with old beer cans, cigarette butts, and one thing that made Brooks stop cold, a plastic camera lens cap half buried in mud. He picked it up. The brand name was worn, but legible, Canon. Someone was taking pictures out here, Mara said. Brooks pocketed the lens cap in an evidence bag. Or scouting victims. Back at the station, they ran the lens cap through the database. No prints, no DNA. But while Mara processed paperwork, Brooks dug deeper into Hollow Creek's history. The town was tiny, population barely 3,000, with a reputation for keeping to itself. But its surroundings were vast. Dozens of hiking trails, abandoned cabins, and dense forests spanning miles. Perfect hiding ground for someone who wanted to vanish or make others vanish. At 3 p.m., the local news station aired the story, Second Mysterious Box Found Near Hollow Creek. Police investigating possible link to cold cases. Brooks cursed under his breath. That'll draw every reporter and amateur sleuth in 100 miles. Mara looked up from her desk. Or it'll draw him. He raised an eyebrow. If he's watching, she said, he'll want to see how close we're getting. Brooks thought about it, then nodded. Set up cameras near the mill. Motion sensors too. If he comes back, I want eyes on him. That night, the mountain wind howled through Hollow Creek. The old trees groaned, and rain returned in soft, rhythmic sheets. Mara stayed late, reviewing surveillance feeds. The monitors flickered, mostly raccoons, the occasional stray dog, nothing human. But just past midnight, she noticed something odd. A figure. Barely visible through the fog, a man appeared at the edge of the mill's camera feed. He wasn't moving toward the box site. He was standing perfectly still, facing the camera. No attempt to hide. No mask. Just stillness. Then, in a flicker of static, he raised his hands slowly and waved. The feed cut to black. Mara's stomach dropped. She grabbed the radio. Brooks, you need to see this. By the time Brooks arrived, the rain was pounding hard. Mara replayed the footage, but the system had already overwritten the frame. Just a burst of static where the figure had stood. Brooks swore under his breath. He knows we're watching. She nodded. And he's not hiding anymore. He glanced at the wall clock. 12:47 a.m. 2 days left. Lock the footage, he said. I'll get the state techs to recover the data. If that's him, he just confirmed the timeline. Morning came slow and gray. The rain hadn't stopped, and neither had the tension inside the Hollow Creek PD. The sheriff called in extra patrols for the 19th, warning the entire department to expect something big. Mara sat at her desk scrolling through local missing persons reports from neighboring counties. Her pen froze when she saw a new entry filed just that morning. Name, Chloe Rivers. Age, 24. Last seen, April 5, 2025. Location, Ridgeway Trail, 6 miles east of Hollow Creek. Her pulse quickened. Brooks, she called out, you need to see this. He leaned over her shoulder. Another missing woman? She went missing 11 days ago. Same age range as Hale. Blonde. College student. He exhaled slowly. If she's part of the pattern, then she's the one on that date, Mara finished. Brooks grabbed his jacket. We're going to Ridgeway Trail. Ridgeway Trail wound deep through the mountains, narrow, slick, and flanked by towering pines that shut out most of the daylight. The parking area was empty except for a single old blue sedan, coated in pollen and mud. Her car, Mara said softly. They called in forensics, then began hiking the path, scanning for signs of disturbance. About a mile in, Brooks spotted something glinting beside a tree root, a silver hair clip shaped like a butterfly. He crouched. Same kind Hale used to wear. Mara's breath fogged the air. He's taunting us. A rustle came from the distance, faint but distinct. Brooks drew his flashlight and gun. Stay behind me, They crept toward the sound, weaving between trees until they reached a shallow creek. On the other side, half buried in the mud, was a third box. Wooden again. Brooks's heart sank. He's escalating. Mara approached slowly, every instinct screaming not to touch it. There was something different about this one. The lid wasn't engraved with a cross. Instead, burned into the surface were 3 words. She is waiting. Mara's throat tightened. Oh God! Brooks knelt and brushed away dirt, revealing a small slit in the side of the box, like a mail slot. Inside, a faint ticking sound echoed. He pulled back sharply. Get back! They retreated behind a fallen log. Brooks called the bomb squad, his voice tight. 15 tense minutes later, the text confirmed it wasn't an explosive, just a small wind-up timer connected to a voice recorder. When they played it, a distorted male voice came through, calm and deliberate. You're close, Detective Brooks. 2 days isn't much time. She's waiting where they all begin. The recording stopped. Mara's pulse hammered. What does that mean? Brooks stared into the woods. He's sending us back to the start. Back at the station, they replayed the message over and over. The phrase, where they all begin, stuck in Brooks's mind. He pulled out the old 2008 file again. The first known box, the one found by kids in the woods. He flipped through the police report until he reached the location details. Found near Black Hollow Park, he read aloud. Same place where we found Marissa Hale's box last week. Mara leaned forward. He's circling back to the same ground. Brooks nodded. Which means if we search that area on the 19th, we might catch him in the act. He looked up, eyes dark and determined. We set the trap. For the next 24 hours, the department worked around the clock. They set up hidden cameras, night vision scopes, and 2 unmarked vehicles near Black Hollow Park. Mara volunteered for overnight surveillance. The woods were silent except for the whisper of rain dripping through leaves. 1 a.m. passed. Then 2 o'clock. Nothing. At 3:12 a.m., Mara's headset crackled with static. Then a faint whisper, not from the radio, but from the dark trees ahead. She froze. You're early. The voice was low, male, too close. She swung her flashlight toward the sound, but there was nothing. Just the mist shifting between the trunks. Brooks, do you copy? She hissed. No response. She tried again, heart racing. Still nothing. Then, from somewhere behind her, a twig snapped. She turned and saw a figure standing in the fog just 10 feet away. Still wearing a hood. The figure raised something, not a weapon, but a camera, and took a single flash photograph. White light exploded in her vision. When her eyes cleared, the figure was gone. Only the echo of the shutter remained. By the time backup arrived, there was no trace, no footprints, no figure, nothing. Just a fresh photo print lying on the ground where the man had stood. Mara picked it up with trembling hands. It was a photo of herself, taken from the exact moment of the flash. And scrawled across the bottom in the same block handwriting were 4 chilling words. See you tomorrow night. The man in the fog. The next morning, Hollow Creek Police Department was electric with tension. The photo of Deputy Mara Collins, taken in the fog moments before the unknown figure vanished, sat under an evidence light, the ink still drying where the rain had smeared its edges. Detective Caleb Brooks stood beside it, jaw tight, coffee untouched in his hand. He was right there. Within 20 feet of my deputy, he said through clenched teeth. And he didn't take her. He wanted her to see him. Mara, pale but steady, leaned against the wall. Her uniform still smelled faintly of damp forest and smoke. He wasn't trying to hide, she said quietly. He wanted to be caught on camera, but only his camera, asterisk. Brooks turned to her. You're sure it was a camera, not a phone? She nodded. Old-style SLR. Big lens. He flashed me like he was collecting proof. Proof of what? That he's in control. The room fell silent. A soft hum from the evidence fan filled the air, the only sound between them. Brooks finally spoke. He's escalating. No longer content to stay invisible. He picked up the photo again. The handwriting, the same block letters as the previous notes, taunted them across the bottom. See you tomorrow night. Brooks checked the wall clock. April 18th. One day before the date carved into the box. April 19th, 2025. By noon, Brooks had the entire department on lockdown protocol. Patrols doubled, unmarked cars staked out trailheads and forest roads, and drones were deployed to sweep the perimeter of Black Hollow Park, where everything seemed to begin and end. But the tension didn't stop there. The local media had exploded with the story overnight. Time capsule killer taunts police, deputy targeted in midnight encounter. Reporters flooded Hollow Creek. Cameras flashed. And the town, a place that once prided itself on its silence, buzzed with rumor and fear. Mara tried to block it out. She sat at her desk, scrolling through missing persons databases again, cross-referencing every case from the past 20 years that matched the killer's pattern. Young women, mid-April, near forested areas. One detail jumped out. Every single one had been reported missing on a rainy night. Her chest tightened. "He waits for storms," she murmured. Brooks looked up from across the room. "What?" "He strikes during storms," she said, turning the monitor toward him. "Every time it's been raining. It's not coincidence. The fog, the noise, the lack of visibility, it covers him." Brooks rubbed his temple. "And tomorrow's forecast?" Mara didn't have to answer. The steady patter of rain already beginning outside the window said it all. By late afternoon, the FBI had officially joined the case. Special Agent Ryan Voss, a tall, clean-cut profiler from Charlotte, arrived with a small team and a folder full of behavioral notes. Brooks didn't like him immediately. Voss had that polished calmness, the kind of confidence that came from years of talking at people, not with them. "Detective Brooks," Voss said, shaking his hand briskly. "We've reviewed your case files. What you're dealing with here is not impulsive. This is premeditated ritualistic behavior, escalation phase." Brooks folded his arms. "We figured that much." Voss ignored the tone. "Your suspect isn't killing for pleasure. He's killing for control, to dictate fear. The boxes, the photos, the dates, they're all about psychological dominance. He wants to be part of the investigation." Mara leaned forward. "Then why contact me directly?" Voss flipped a page in his folder. "You were at his location before he was ready. You disrupted his process. To someone like this, that's intimate. You've become part of his story now." Mara felt a cold knot in her stomach. "So I'm the next box." Voss looked at her steadily. "You're his message. Whether or not you end up in a box depends on how we play this." That night, the department transformed into a war room. Every officer on shift was briefed. Live feeds from trail cameras and drones filled a wall of screens. A storm rolled in around 8 p.m., thunder rumbling across the mountains like distant artillery. Brooks stood by the window, watching lightning flash through the clouds. He'd seen killers like this before, men who thought themselves artists, whose canvas was chaos. But something about this one was different. The precision, the timing, the strange empathy threaded through cruelty. He turned to Mara. "How's the surveillance feed?" "Quiet," she said, her eyes scanning monitors. "Too quiet." As if on cue, one of the monitors flickered. Camera 7, Black Hollow Park trailhead, glitched, then cleared. A figure appeared. Same dark hood. Same stance. He was standing in the middle of the clearing, under the downpour, facing directly into the camera. Brooks leaned closer. "Zoom in." The figure's head tilted slightly. Something white fluttered in his hand. A photograph. He stepped forward, close enough for the lens to focus. The photo was visible now, Mara's face, printed again, but this time with a red X drawn over it. The screen went black. "God damn it!" Brooks barked. "Pull the feed back up." The tech scrambled to reconnect, but the system refused to reboot. Lightning struck somewhere nearby, cutting power for 3 full seconds before the emergency lights flickered on. When the screens returned, the figure was gone. But in his place, lying in the rain-soaked mud of the trailhead, was another box. Brooks and Mara arrived within minutes, lights flashing across the drenched park. Rain hammered their coats as they approached the new box, illuminated by a flashlight beam. It was smaller than the others, wrapped in clear plastic to keep it dry. A single Polaroid was taped to the top, a photo of the Hollow Creek Police Department building, taken from across the street. Written across it in black marker. "You'll find her inside." Mara's voice was tight. "Inside what? The station?" Brooks's pulse jumped. "He's not talking about you." They tore back to the cruiser, hydroplaning through puddles. The station was only 7 minutes away, but every second felt like an hour. When they burst through the doors, chaos had already broken loose. A dispatcher shouted from behind the front desk. "Detective! The holding cell, you need to see this." Brooks ran down the corridor, Mara close behind. Inside the small concrete cell, the overhead light flickered weakly. On the cot sat a young woman, drenched, shivering, and wrapped in a gray blanket. "Chloe Rivers," Brooks breathed. "The missing woman. Alive." She looked up, eyes wide with terror. "He said you'd find me." An hour later, Chloe sat in the interview room, trembling as Mara handed her a cup of tea. The girl's wrists were bruised, her voice hoarse. Brooks hit record. "Chloe, can you tell us what happened?" She nodded shakily. "He picked me up 2 weeks ago. I was hitchhiking near Ridgeway Trail. Said his car broke down, asked for help pushing it. When I got close, he grabbed me." Her hands trembled. "He didn't hurt me. Not like that. He just made me talk. Asked questions. About my family, my life. He said he was documenting me." "Documenting?" Mara repeated. Chloe nodded. "Like an interview. He had cameras everywhere. Old ones, film cameras. He made me sit in front of them and say my name, where I was from. Then he'd ask things like, 'Do you think people remember you when you're gone?'" Brooks exchanged a grim glance with Mara. "What else did he say?" Chloe hesitated, eyes glassy with fear. "He said you were next. That the box would make sense after tonight." The storm outside grew violent, shaking the windows. Brooks knew they had to move. The killer wouldn't risk letting Chloe live unless it served his design. He called in every available unit. "We've got less than 12 hours. He's not done." Meanwhile, Mara sat beside Chloe, voice low and steady. "Did he ever mention where he kept you?" Chloe closed her eyes, trying to remember. "There was a smell, metal and oil. Like old engines. And I heard water, dripping." Mara nodded slowly. "The old quarry." Brooks heard her from across the room. "The auto shop near the quarry's been abandoned for years." Mara stood, adrenaline surging. "That's where he's finishing it." They reached the quarry road just after midnight. The rain had turned to mist again, thick and suffocating. Flashlights cut through the darkness as the team spread out, moving toward the skeletal remains of the old auto shop. The air inside was heavy with oil and rot. Rusted tools hung from the walls, and puddles mirrored the flashlight beams in shaky reflections. "Clear right," an officer whispered. Brooks moved deeper in, every nerve taut. "Stay sharp." A faint click echoed, the sound of a camera shutter. Then another. Brooks turned his light toward the far end of the room and froze. Hundreds of photographs covered the walls. All of them of women. Smiling, laughing, unaware they were being watched. Some photos were decades old, some recent. And in the center of the wall was a single new picture. Mara Collins, taken the night before. Below it, written in dripping black ink. "Tomorrow, the fog lifts." Mara's breath hitched. "He's here." Brooks motioned for silence. They moved deeper, flashlights cutting across the shadowed corners. A creak of metal came from above, the sound of footsteps on the catwalk. "Up there." Brooks raised his gun, scanning the upper level, but the fog pouring through the broken roof made visibility almost impossible. A shape darted across the beams, fast and fluid. "Police." "Drop it." The shape paused, silhouetted by lightning, tall, wearing a hood, the glint of a camera lens reflecting the beam. Then he vanished into the mist. Brooks and Mara rushed up the stairs, but the upper walkway was empty. A door hung open at the far end, leading back outside. They burst through it just in time to see taillights disappearing down the muddy road. Brooks fired up the radio. "Suspect fleeing south on Quarry Road. Dark SUV, no plates." But by the time the units reached the crossroads, the vehicle was gone, swallowed by the fog and rain. Back at the station, the adrenaline faded into exhaustion. The killer had been right there, and slipped through their fingers again. Brooks slammed a fist onto the table. "He's toying with us." Mara stared at the photos retrieved from the wall, hundreds of captured faces staring back. "No," she whispered. "He's cataloging us." She pointed to one photo, a young woman with short hair and a Hollow Creek diner apron. "Brooks," she said quietly, "that's Marissa Hale. But look at the date on the photo edge." He leaned in. The timestamp read, April 18th, 2021, a full year before she vanished. "He's been watching his victims long before they disappear," Mara said. Brooks exhaled slowly. "And now he's watching us." Outside, thunder rolled again, louder this time, closer. The storm had one more night to burn itself out. And somewhere in the mountains, the man with the camera was already preparing the next box. The house on Quarry Road. The morning fog hung thick over Hollow Creek, curling around the treetops like a ghost reluctant to let go. Detective Avery Holt drove along Quarry Road, his headlights cutting through the gray veil. The tires hissed on wet asphalt, and the rhythmic sound of the windshield wipers provided the only company in the otherwise silent car. He'd been up all night reviewing every photo, every scrap of paper, every clue from the time capsules. One detail had clawed at his mind until he couldn't ignore it anymore: the background of the third photo. The woman in the picture, Emma Reed, stood beside a red pickup, smiling, unaware her face would soon decorate a missing poster. But behind her, just visible through the frame, was a house, cracked windows, boarded door, ivy crawling up the siding like veins. Holt had recognized it instantly. The old Harlan house. Quarry Road. It had been abandoned for nearly 15 years, ever since the Harlan family vanished overnight. Holt slowed as the house came into view. It looked worse than he remembered. The paint had peeled off completely, leaving the wood a mottled gray. A "No trespassing" sign hung sideways from a rusted nail. The porch sagged under years of rot, and a single shutter creaked in the wind. He parked at the end of the gravel drive, killed the engine, and sat for a long moment. "You're not supposed to be here alone," his partner's voice echoed in his mind. Detective Leah Byrne had called in sick that morning, though Holt knew better. After finding the second capsule, she hadn't been herself. She'd stopped sleeping, stopped talking during case reviews. She had confessed to him, in a whisper, that the second capsule had contained something she'd never mentioned to anyone: a photograph of her brother. He'd disappeared 20 years ago, and the date on that capsule's lid matched the day he vanished. Holt stepped out of the car and approached the Harlan house. The air was damp and still. No birds, no wind, just the sound of his boots crunching on gravel. He reached the porch, tested the first step, and felt it groan under his weight. He climbed carefully, flashlight in hand, and tried the door. Locked, or at least it had been. A gentle push, and the swollen wood gave way with a groan. The smell hit him first: mold, dust, and something faintly metallic. He swept the light across the room. Peeling wallpaper. A couch half-eaten by mildew. A stack of yellowed newspapers dated 2011. Everything was coated in a thin film of dust. And then something glinted. He stepped closer. On the coffee table lay a small glass jar, sealed with wax. Inside was a folded piece of paper. Holt's stomach dropped. He'd seen jars like that before. They were always found near the capsules, as if whoever buried them had left smaller clues scattered around town. He carefully broke the wax and unfolded the note. "You're early. Come back on the 17th. He looked at his watch. October 12th. 5 days. He pocketed the note and moved deeper into the house. The floorboards creaked, threatening to collapse. He could hear the distant drip of water from a broken pipe somewhere below. He entered what must have been the kitchen. Rusted appliances, shattered dishes, and a pile of animal bones in the corner. He crouched, shining his flashlight closer. Not deer. Not raccoon. These bones were too small. Too precise. Birds, he realized. Their wings had been neatly removed. The feathers, however, were arranged in a circle on the counter, deliberate, patterned, almost ritualistic. Holt took out his phone, snapped photos, and made a quick note in his recorder. This is Holt at the Harlan property. Possible connection to prior evidence. Scene contains. He froze mid-sentence. From somewhere upstairs came a faint creak. He turned off the recorder, heart thudding. "Hello," he called out. No answer. Another creak. This one slower. Like weight shifting across a floorboard. He stepped quietly toward the staircase, gun drawn. The air upstairs looked darker somehow, like the light itself refused to go there. "Police," he said, voice low but firm. "If someone's up there, come out now." Nothing. He started climbing. Each step moaned beneath him. At the top, the hallway stretched long and narrow, lined with doors that stood slightly ajar. His flashlight beam danced across faded wallpaper, children's drawings still taped to the walls, crayon suns and stick figures. Then something caught his eye. A door at the very end was shut tight. Every other one had been open. He approached slowly, pulse quickening. The smell of iron grew stronger. He reached for the doorknob, and it turned before he could touch it. The door creaked open a few inches. Holt froze. Inside, the flashlight revealed a bedroom. Dusty bed, broken dresser, cracked window. And on the floor, right in the center, was a small wooden box, identical to the others. Another time capsule. But this one hadn't been buried. He stepped closer. The lid was marked with the same meticulous handwriting as before, carved into the wood with a knife. But the date made his stomach twist. October 17th, 2025. 5 days from now. And below the date, in faint, shaky pencil, was a name. Detective Avery Holt. His mouth went dry. He stared at the box for what felt like an hour, unable to breathe. Whoever was doing this, they weren't documenting victims anymore. They were announcing them. He pulled out his phone, snapped photos, then called Leah. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. "Leah, it's Holt," he said, voice trembling. "I'm at the Harlan place. There's another box. My name's on it. The date's the 17th. I need backup now." Static filled the line. Then a faint whisper, almost like her voice, but distorted. "Don't open it." The call cut off. Holt backed away from the box. His instincts screamed to leave, but something about the handwriting nagged at him. He'd seen it before, in one of the older police reports. He rummaged through his notebook, flipping pages until he found it. A photo of a note left at the first disappearance, written in the same elegant script. But that note had been signed. He flipped the wooden box over, half expecting to see nothing, but there it was, etched faintly into the base. The same initials that appeared in the Harlan family files. Eleanor Harlan, the woman who had vanished from this very house 15 years ago. The realization hit him like a wave. What if the killer wasn't some stranger recreating the past, but someone tied to it? Someone who had been there when the Harlans disappeared? He leaned closer to the box. The lid was sealed with wax, but loose enough to lift if he wanted. Leah's warning echoed in his head. "Don't open it." He hesitated. Then, against his better judgment, slid his knife under the seal. The wax cracked softly. Inside was a single Polaroid. He pulled it out, the edges smudged with fingerprints. It was him, standing in the Harlan living room, right now. Same jacket, same flashlight, same angle. And behind him, in the blurry background, a figure in the shadows. Someone was in the house. He spun around, flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. The hallway was empty. He could hear his own breath, sharp and uneven. He moved back toward the stairs, every step deliberate. The house felt alive now, floorboards groaning, windows whispering. At the base of the staircase, the front door stood open. Outside, the fog had thickened, rolling through the trees like smoke. He stepped out, gun raised, scanning the yard. Nothing moved. But then, near the tree lean, a flicker of movement. A man, tall, wearing a long coat, disappeared into the mist. "Stop! Police!" Holt shouted, charging forward. He reached the spot where the figure had stood, but there was no one there. Only footprints leading deeper into the woods, and another small jar resting on a fallen log. Inside was a feather and a note. 5 days. Holt stood in the gray silence of Hollow Creek, staring at the message, feeling the weight of what was coming. The killer had just marked his date. And he had 5 days to figure out how to stop it, or become the next name in the ground. The 5 days. The morning after the discovery at the Harlan house, Hollow Creek woke beneath a thick blanket of mist that refused to lift. The entire town seemed quieter, the chatter in the diner hushed, the newspaper stand empty, even the usual barking dogs muted. It was as if the town itself was holding its breath. Detective Avery Holt hadn't slept. He sat in the station conference room, the Polaroid from the box laid out in front of him. His face stared back at him, caught mid-motion, flashlight in hand, standing in the same room where he'd found the box. But behind him, the figure in the shadows was still a blur. He had shown the image to the techs, to the chief, even to Leah when she finally arrived late that morning. No one could cleanly enhance it. Too dark, too grainy, too deliberate. Whoever took that picture wanted to be seen just enough to haunt him. Leah Byrne entered the room carrying 2 cups of coffee. Her eyes were red-rimmed, exhaustion tucked beneath the surface of forced calm. "You look like hell," she said, setting 1 cup beside him. "I've looked worse," Holt muttered, not taking his eyes off the photo. "Any luck with the prints?" she asked. He shook his head. Smudged. Probably deliberate. Whoever's doing this knows what they're doing. They're meticulous. Leah rubbed her temple. "You said the initials H were carved under the box?" "Yeah. Eleanor Harlan. She disappeared 15 years ago. The whole family did. No bodies, no signs of struggle, nothing. The house just sat there ever since." Leah frowned. "You think she's connected to the capsules?" "I don't know," Holt admitted. "But if she's not the one doing this, someone's using her name for a reason." Leah crossed her arms. "And the date? 5 days from now." "October 17th, Holt said quietly. "The day I'm supposed to die." She gave him a sharp look. "Don't say that." "I'm not superstitious," he said, though his voice betrayed him. "But whoever's behind this, they know things, Leah. Things about you. About me. The capsules show victims before they vanish. They know when. They know where. If they say the 17th, then I have 5 days." The chief burst into the room, breaking the tension. Chief Wardell was a broad man, silver hair and a temper as short as the daylight in Hollow Creek. "Holt, Byrne, you two better tell me you've got something new," he barked. "We do," Leah said quickly, holding up the photo. "Taken inside the Harlan place." "Someone's playing games, Chief." Wardell leaned over the table, squinting at the Polaroid. "That you, Holt?" "Yeah," Holt said. "Who's the other one?" "That's what we're trying to find out." Wardell exhaled heavily, pacing. "You two better be careful. I don't like this message crap. You've got 5 days, Holt? Then we treat this like a direct threat against an officer. I'm putting you under protective detail." "No," Holt said immediately. "If I go into hiding, we lose the chance to bait him. He wants me out there. I say we give him what he wants, but on our terms." Leah stared at him. "You want to use yourself as bait?" "It's already personal," Holt said. "Might as well make it useful." Wardell studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "You've got till the 17th. After that, I'm pulling you whether you like it or not." Day 1, October 13th. Holt and Leah retraced every location linked to the capsules. The Hollow Creek Library, the old sawmill, the post office basement where the second box had been found. At each site, they found traces of disturbance, displaced dirt, broken branches, faint shoe prints that led nowhere. Whoever was planting the boxes knew the woods better than any local. That evening, Leah pulled something new from the records. "I ran the Harlan name through the county archives. You're not gonna like this." "What?" "There's no death certificate for Eleanor Harlan. Or her husband. Or their son. They're still listed as missing. But here's the weird part. Someone's been renewing their property tax every single year since they disappeared." Holt looked up sharply. "Who?" Leah turned the monitor toward him. "Payment made by wire. No return address. Just the initials E. Day 2, October 14th. The next morning, Holt drove alone to the Hollow Creek Cemetery. The fog clung low between the headstones, and the cold air smelled faintly of iron and pine. He didn't know why he came. Instinct, maybe. Every case he'd worked seemed to circle back to this place. As he passed row after row of graves, one caught his attention. A small, weathered stone half buried by leaves. Ethan Harlan, 2005 to 2010. The son. So there had been a death. He crouched, brushing moss from the inscription, when something clicked beneath his boot. He froze, moved the leaves aside, a small latch embedded in the ground. A hidden compartment. He pried it open carefully. Inside lay a tiny wooden box. Another capsule. Heart pounding, he lifted the lid. Inside was a single photograph. A little boy in a red sweater, standing beside a woman whose face had been burned out with acid. Below it a note. The past feeds the present. Stop digging. He felt something behind him. A breath, faint and cold, brushing his neck. He spun around. No one. Just fog. Day 3, October 15th. The tension at the station grew thick. Leah barely spoke. Holt hadn't gone home in 2 nights. Every creak in the walls, every ring of the phone set their nerves on edge. At noon, a package arrived at the front desk. No return label. Just Holt's name. He opened it with gloved hands. Inside, a cassette tape. He found an old player in the evidence room and pressed play. Static hissed. Then a woman's voice emerged, distorted but calm. Detective Holt. You shouldn't have gone back to the house. The boxes aren't warnings, they're invitations. You've already accepted yours. Leah's face went pale. That voice, she sounds familiar, Holt finished. Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. They replayed the tape. Slowed it. The tone, the cadence, soft, deliberate, like someone reading a bedtime story. Leah gasped. That's Eleanor Harlan. I heard her in the old 911 tapes when her family went missing. But she'd be dead by now, Holt said quietly. Unless she never left, Leah whispered. Day 4, October 16th. Holt didn't go home that night either. He drove aimlessly through Hollow Creek, headlights sweeping over the endless stretch of forest roads. He found himself back at Quarry Road before he even realized it. The Harlan house stood like a shadow against the fog. Something about it drew him in. Not fear, but inevitability. He stepped out of the car, flashlight ready. The note from before still burned in his pocket. Come back on the 17th. Tomorrow. He didn't enter the house, not yet. He circled it instead, noting faint impressions in the dirt near the porch, fresh footprints. Someone had been there recently. He knelt down, touching the edge of one print. It was deep. Male, maybe a size 11. The same tread pattern from the site of the second capsule. They were getting bolder. He turned back toward his car and froze. A Polaroid was tucked under his windshield wiper. He pulled it out. His throat went dry. It was Leah, standing in front of the station, looking directly into the camera. The date scribbled at the bottom, October 17th, 2025. Day 5, October 17th. Holt's world narrowed to the ticking of the clock. Every minute brought the promise of something inevitable. The station was on alert. Wardell ordered extra patrols around the Harlan property. Leah refused to leave Holt's side, despite his protests. I'm not losing another partner, she said. The day dragged on. The town was quiet, too quiet. Holt sat at his desk, staring at the Polaroid of Leah, when his phone buzzed. A known number. He answered. Holt. Static. Then that same woman's voice. You shouldn't have ignored the warnings. Who is this? Holt demanded. You've both been chosen. Check the time capsule again. The line went dead. He looked at Leah. We're going back to the Harlan place. They reached Quarry Road just after sunset. The air was heavy, the mist almost metallic in taste. Police cruisers lined the drive, lights off, officers waiting. Holt and Leah stepped out, flashlights cutting through the gloom. The front door stood wide open. Inside, everything was just as before, except for one thing. A second box sat beside the first. Identical. The wax seal on top still soft. Leah whispered. She said, "Both." Holt nodded. "One for each of us." They exchanged a look, the kind that said they both knew what was coming but couldn't turn back. Together, they opened the boxes. Inside Holt's, another Polaroid. This time of Leah, standing outside her apartment window, taken from inside the room. Inside Leah's, a Polaroid of Holt, sitting at his desk earlier that day, phone pressed to his ear. Someone had been watching them. Everywhere. Then they heard it, footsteps on the porch. Slow, heavy. Holt drew his weapon. "Show yourself." A voice floated through the doorway. "You finally came when you were supposed to." A silhouette appeared in the fog. Long coat, pale hair, a face both familiar and impossible. "Eleanor Harlan," Leah whispered. The woman smiled faintly. "It's been so long since someone called me that." Holt's finger tightened on the trigger. "You're supposed to be dead. Death is just a date on a lid," she said softly. "And yours is now." The power cut. Darkness swallowed the house. And as the mist surged through the open door, 2 gunshots echoed across Hollow Creek. The woman in the mist. The air in Hollow Creek had taken on a strange heaviness. By the 6th day of the investigation, it wasn't just the fog that hung over the town. It was the tension, the unspoken dread that something irreversible was coming. Detective Emily Hart hadn't slept properly in 3 nights. Her desk at the station was cluttered with photographs, maps, and scrawled notes about the capsules and victims. The connection was undeniable now. Every capsule contained clues about the next disappearance. But what they hadn't figured out was how the killer knew his victims in such intimate detail before they vanished. The most recent capsule, the one with Lisa Hargrove's belongings, still haunted Emily. Lisa had disappeared 4 days ago, and according to the pattern they'd identified, the next capsule would appear on the 5th day. That was today. She rubbed her temples as Officer Dana Morales entered with 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Still nothing from the Hargrove search?" Emily asked. Dana shook her head. "We've got dogs combing the ridge near Miller's Pond, but the fog's thick as soup up there. Visibility's down to 10 feet. Emily sighed. "That's exactly how he likes it." Dana frowned. "He?" Emily looked up. "This isn't random. The killer plans everything. The capsule placement, the victims, the timing. He wants us to see the pattern, to chase him. It's a game." Dana hesitated. "What happens when we catch up to him?" Emily didn't answer. By noon, the town's outskirts were swallowed by mist. The search teams trudged through mud and moss near Quarry Ridge, the same area where the first capsule had been unearthed. Sheriff Dalton, who'd been coordinating the ground units, radioed in. "We got a hit near the old creek bed." His voice crackled through Emily's radio. "Dogs are reacting to something buried. About 2 feet deep." Emily's heart spiked. "I'm on my way." She grabbed her coat, the fog outside like a pale curtain swallowing the world whole. The drive to the creek was silent but heavy with anticipation. As she arrived, red and blue lights flickered faintly through the mist. Dalton met her at the perimeter. "It's another one," he said grimly. "Same type of box. Metal, rusted corners. Sealed tight." They stood at the edge of the shallow hole, staring down at the object. It was about the size of a shoebox, slick with moisture and caked in mud. Emily crouched beside it, her gloved hands brushing the soil away. "No signs of disturbance around it?" "None," Dalton said. "Whoever put it here knew how to move in this terrain." "Let's open it." They carefully pried the lid free. The hinges groaned as cold air escaped, carrying a faint metallic smell. Inside was the familiar arrangement: photographs, trinkets, and letters. But this time, something was different. Emily lifted out a stack of Polaroids. The first showed a foggy forest path. The second, the outline of a woman standing among the trees, her face blurred, but the silhouette was unmistakably feminine. "Zoom in on that," Dalton muttered, leaning close. Emily squinted. The woman's figure was partially obscured, but she was wearing something distinct: a long, dark coat and what looked like a vintage pendant around her neck. "Look at the background," Emily whispered. "That's Quarry Road. You can see the fence post." Dana, who just arrived, pointed to the side of the box. There's an engraving on the lid. Emily turned it over. Scratched into the metal, almost crudely, were 3 words. The Woman in Mist. Back at the station, the photos were scanned and analyzed. The timestamp on the Polaroids placed them at least 2 weeks ago, long before Lisa Hargrove vanished. How does he know? Dana muttered. How does he take photos of people before they disappear? Emily's mind raced. Maybe the capsule's not predicting, it's documenting. Maybe these people met him before they went missing, and they didn't even realize it. Dalton crossed his arms. You think this woman in the photos is next? I don't think, Emily said quietly. I know. She spread the photos across the table. The foggy background, the shadowed figure. It was eerie how lifelike the images felt, like they were taken by someone standing too close. Suddenly, Emily froze. In one photo, barely visible behind the woman, was a vehicle's reflection in a puddle, a white van with a dented rear door. Enhance this, she said to the tech specialist. A few keystrokes later, the image clarified. The van's license plate wasn't fully visible, but a partial number appeared, 4K7. Emily's heart skipped. We need a list of every white van registered in the Hollow Creek area with that sequence. The search would take hours, but it was the first solid lead they'd had. At sunset, the mist grew thicker, turning the town into a maze of gray. Emily decided to drive home to shower and change, though she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following her. The narrow road leading to her cabin was lined with skeletal trees, their branches bending toward the fog. As she neared her driveway, she saw movement, just a flicker, at the tree line. She slowed. Hello. Silence. Then, faintly, the crunch of leaves. Her hand moved toward her holster. The fog coiled around her car like smoke. She stepped out slowly, scanning the woods with her flashlight. Police. Show yourself. A figure emerged, small, shivering and barefoot. A woman in a soaked coat stumbled into the beam of light, her face pale and tear-streaked. My name is Lisa, she gasped. Please, he's coming. Emily's blood ran cold. Lisa Hargrove? Lisa nodded weakly before collapsing into her arms. Back at Hollow Creek General Hospital, Lisa drifted in and out of consciousness. Her body was covered in cuts and bruises, her clothes torn. Doctors worked quickly, while Emily waited just outside the curtain, heart pounding. How the hell did she get out? Dana whispered. He's never let anyone go before. Emily shook her head. Maybe he wanted her to. When Lisa finally woke, she looked terrified, not of being found, but of what she'd seen. Lisa, Emily said softly, pulling up a chair. You're safe now. But we need to know what happened. Lisa's eyes darted around the room. He said he'd show me something beautiful. Who said that? The man, she whispered. The one who lives in the fog. Emily leaned closer. Do you remember where he took you? Lisa nodded weakly. There's a house, old, broken, by the quarry road. The windows are all boarded, but he lives there. I heard him talking to someone, but there was no one else in the room. Talking to who? Lisa's lips trembled. To the mist. He said it listens. Later that night, Emily drove to Quarry Road with Dalton and a tactical team. They parked at the edge of the dirt path, the fog so dense their headlights barely cut through it. The structure appeared as a shadow first, a 2-story farmhouse, weather-beaten and skeletal. Vines crept along the porch railings. Every window was either broken or nailed shut. Dalton whispered, "This place shouldn't even be standing." Emily motioned for silence and approached the door. It was unlocked. Inside, the air was thick with decay. Dust motes floated like ash. A faint ticking echoed from somewhere deeper inside. The first room was filled with discarded photo equipment. Tripods, old cameras, rolls of film scattered across the floor. The walls were plastered with photographs, dozens of them, faces of men, women, children, all taken in fog. Dana covered her mouth. Oh my God. Emily stepped closer, her eyes scanning the collage. These are the victims. Each photo had a date written beneath it. The earliest one was from 1997. The most recent? Today's date. And beneath that photo was an image of a woman standing in the mist, Emily herself. Her breath caught. "He's here." Suddenly, from the upper floor, came the creak of a floorboard. Dalton drew his weapon. Upstairs. They rushed up the staircase, the air colder with every step. The corridor stretched long and narrow, lined with more photos. At the end was a door slightly ajar, light spilling through the crack. Emily pushed it open slowly. Inside was a small room. A chair faced the window. And sitting in it was a woman, motionless, her hair cascading over her shoulders. "Ma'am?" Emily said, raising her flashlight. The woman didn't move. She stepped closer, her beam revealing pale, lifeless skin. The woman's eyes were open but glassy, her face serene. In her lap was a Polaroid camera. Dana whispered, horrified, "It's the woman from the photos." Emily's gaze fell to the floor. Beside the chair was another metal box, identical to the others, but this one had a fresh engraving on the lid. "Tomorrow." Emily's hands trembled as she backed away. The room seemed to close in, the mist outside pressing against the windows like a living thing. Dalton knelt by the woman, feeling for a pulse. Nothing. "Get the tech team up here," Emily ordered, her voice unsteady. "We need prints, DNA, anything that ties her to the others." But as she turned, she noticed something else. Footprints in the dust, still damp. Someone had been here minutes ago. And they hadn't left through the stairs. Her radio crackled. "Detective Hart, we've got movement outside, east perimeter." Emily bolted for the window. Through the fog, she saw a figure moving slowly toward the tree line. Wearing a long coat. "The mist," Lisa's voice echoed in her head. "He lives in the mist." Emily didn't wait. She drew her weapon and ran out the front door into the swirling fog, her flashlight beam cutting through the gray. "Police! Stop!" she shouted. The figure paused. For a moment, she thought he'd turn around. But then he stepped backward and vanished, swallowed whole by the fog. Only his voice remained, low and distant, almost a whisper. "Tomorrow, detective." The sound faded into the mist, leaving Emily standing in silence, cold, breathless, and certain of one thing. The next capsule had already been buried. Tomorrow's box. Morning came without sunlight. The fog over Hollow Creek hadn't lifted. It had only thickened, swallowing the town whole in a silvery blur. Detective Emily Hart stood outside the old farmhouse on Quarry Road, her boots sinking into damp earth. The crime scene was still sealed off, marked with yellow tape that flapped weakly in the wind. Behind her, Sheriff Dalton and the forensic team moved carefully in and out, cataloging every piece of evidence they could find inside the decaying structure. But Emily's mind was elsewhere, still trapped in that upstairs room where the lifeless woman sat by the window, the engraved box resting beside her. "Tomorrow." The word was still echoing in her head. The killer wasn't just toying with them, he was announcing his next move. "Anything new from the prince?" she asked as the forensic lead approached. The woman shook her head. "Still processing, but we've confirmed the victim upstairs is Ellen Parrish, 41, from Green Hollow Township. Reported missing 8 days ago." Emily nodded grimly. "That matches the timeline. Lisa Hargrove disappeared 5 days after Ellen. And the next one," Dalton added, joining them, "is supposed to happen tomorrow." Emily looked out toward the fog-covered forest, her voice low. "Unless we find that box first." They returned to the Hollow Creek Police Department to regroup. The board in the operations room was covered in photos of the capsules, the victims, and the connecting lines that mapped out the killer's twisted chronology. Dana Morales stood beside the timeline. "If we're reading this right," she said, "the killer plants the capsule one day before the next disappearance. Each one contains items from the victim who hasn't vanished yet." "So today," Emily said, tapping her pen on the board, "he buries the capsule meant for tomorrow's victim." Dalton grunted. "We just have to find it before he does." "Easier said than done," Dana muttered. "He's always ahead of us." Emily stared at the map of Hollow Creek, eyes narrowing on one spot, Miller's Pond. It was where the first capsule was discovered, and where the pattern of burial sites seemed to form a perfect circle around the town center. "Every capsule," Emily said slowly, forms part of a ring. The radius closes tighter each time. He's circling something or someone. Dalton frowned. You're saying the killer's closing in on a final target? Emily nodded. And when he finishes the circle, I think we'll find him. By late afternoon, Emily and Dana were trudging through the forest north of Miller's Pond, their boots crunching through wet leaves. The mist made it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. Dana swept her metal detector slowly across the soil. Still nothing. Emily's flashlight beam danced across the underbrush, catching glimpses of tree trunks scarred with old carvings. He's been here before. Look at these marks, he uses them as trail signs. They followed the carvings deeper into the woods. The air grew colder, quieter. No birds. No movement. Just the sound of dripping water and distant wind. Then, Dana's detector beeped faintly. Wait. She crouched. I've got something. Emily knelt beside her, scraping away layers of wet dirt. The metallic surface emerged slowly, a rusted corner, just like before. Her stomach tightened. That's it. Together, they unearthed the small metal box, its lid sealed shut with tape and engraved markings etched into its surface. The letters were rough but clear. Tomorrow's box. Emily exhaled sharply. He's mocking us now. Should we open it here? Dana asked. Emily shook her head. No, we'll take it back. I want it opened in a controlled environment. But as they started back toward their vehicle, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on them. The forest felt alive, watching, breathing. She turned sharply once, flashlight slicing through the mist. Nothing, just trees. And yet she could swear she heard a low, distant whisper, carried by the wind. You're too late. At the station, the evidence lab was sealed. Cameras recorded every angle as Emily carefully pried open the lid of the new capsule. The team gathered around her in tense silence. Inside, as expected, lay photographs, trinkets, and a folded letter. Emily lifted the photos first. The first image was of a foggy bridge, Hollow Creek's old railway overpass. The second showed a person standing in front of it, facing away from the camera. The third photo made her freeze. It was a close-up shot of her own car. The license plate visible, parked outside her home. Dana's eyes widened. Emily. She flipped to the next photo. It showed her office desk at the station, papers scattered, a coffee mug half full. The next one was the worst yet, Emily herself, asleep in her chair. The photo was taken from inside her office. For a moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the lights. He's targeting you, Dalton said finally, his voice low. Emily's throat went dry. No. He's warning me. Dana frowned. Warning you about what? She turned to the last photo, a Polaroid of a door. Her door. The same one she used to enter her cabin. And scrawled across the bottom in ink was a single word. Tomorrow. That night, Emily refused to go home. She sat in her office, the blinds drawn, the door locked. A patrol unit was stationed outside the precinct, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. Every creak in the hallway made her flinch. Every flicker of the light made her look over her shoulder. Dalton stopped by around midnight, bringing a paper cup of coffee. You should get some rest, Hart. We've got extra units watching your place. I'm not leaving here, she said quietly. He nodded. Then I'll make sure someone's always on this floor. Whoever this psycho is, he's not getting to you. She tried to thank him, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she turned her attention back to the box, studying every item inside. A small brass key, an old coin, a strip of film negatives. She held the film up to the light. The images were faint, but one stood out clearly, a man's face partially obscured by fog. He looked older, mid-40s, sharp jawline, sunken eyes. Can we run a facial recognition scan on this? She asked the technician. He nodded and fed the negatives into the scanner. A few moments later, the computer began cross-referencing through state databases. And then took the match. The screen displayed a name, Samuel Price. Emily blinked. Who the hell is Samuel Price? The technician typed quickly. Former photographer. Lived here in Hollow Creek until 2012. Went missing 10 years ago. Dalton frowned. Missing? Yeah, the text said. Declared dead 3 years back. His house burned down, and the remains they found were never fully identified. Emily's mind raced. What if he never died? What if he's been here all along? At 3 a.m., unable to sleep, Emily opened the case files from the old fire. Samuel Price had been known for his eerie landscape photography, misty forests, abandoned homes, long exposures of fog. But one line in the coroner's report caught her attention. Remains were severely burned. Dental confirmation was inconclusive. A cold chill crawled up her spine. The killer had been photographing fog-covered victims for years. The time capsules, the Polaroids, the precision, it all fit with someone obsessed with capturing moments before death. And Samuel Price had spent decades doing just that. She flipped through his archived work, each photograph more haunting than the last. But one image made her blood run cold. It was of a young woman standing on the Hollow Creek Bridge. The caption read, "The beauty of tomorrow." Just before dawn, the radio on Emily's desk crackled. "Unit 4 to Detective Hart. You might want to get down to the bridge." Her heart dropped. Why? There's another capsule. By the time she arrived, the fog was so thick it seemed to pulse around the headlights of the police cruisers. Officers stood in a tight circle at the center of the old bridge, flashlights illuminating a small, freshly dug hole. In it sat another metal box, this one newer, polished, deliberate. Emily crouched beside it, her breath trembling as she read the engraving. "Final capture." Dalton swallowed hard. "This is it, isn't it?" Emily nodded. "He's finishing the circle." She opened the box slowly. Inside, there were no photographs, no trinkets, only a single sheet of glossy paper. She unfolded it with trembling hands. It was a photograph, taken in the fog just hours earlier. It showed the bridge, the flashing police lights, and her, kneeling exactly as she was now, opening the box. Dana whispered behind her, "Emily, that's this moment." And scrawled beneath the image in red ink were the words, "Tomorrow is today." Emily froze, her heart hammering in her chest. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the fog, a distant click, the unmistakable snap of a Polaroid camera. She turned sharply, flashlight cutting through the mist. "Show yourself," she shouted. The fog rippled, and from the shadows beyond the bridge, a figure stepped forward, coat draped over his shoulders, camera dangling from his hand. Samuel Price smiled faintly, eyes glinting in the pale light. "Detective Hart," he said softly. "I've been waiting for this picture." The camera clicked again, and the mist swallowed them both. The photographer's secret. The bridge fell silent after the camera clicked. No one could see further than an arm's length through the fog. For a moment, it was as though time itself had stopped, the stillness thick and suffocating. "Emily!" Dalton's voice echoed somewhere behind her. "Hart, where are you?" But Emily Hart couldn't answer. Her breath caught as she locked eyes with the man who had haunted Hollow Creek for months, Samuel Price. He stood no more than 10 feet away, his camera hanging from a worn leather strap, the lens pointed at her like a weapon. His coat flapped slightly in the wind, revealing a dark, tattered shirt beneath. His face was gaunt, framed by graying hair and deep-set eyes that gleamed with something unreadable. "Samuel Price," Emily said, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "You're supposed to be dead." He tilted his head slightly, almost amused. "Dead?" He chuckled softly. "No, detective. Death is for people who stop being seen. I've always been watching." Emily's grip on her gun tightened. "You've been killing innocent people." Price took a slow step closer, his boots crunching on the damp wood. "No. I've been preserving them. You people bury your dead and forget them. I make them eternal." Behind her, faint red and blue lights flickered through the mist, backup units approaching. Emily could hear Dalton shouting orders, but her focus stayed locked on Price. "Drop the camera," she ordered. He raised it instead and took another photo. The flash burst through the fog like lightning. Emily flinched. When her vision cleared, Price was gone. "Damn it," she shouted, sprinting into the fog. "He's moving north toward the woods." Dalton's voice crackled over the radio. All units, we've got eyes on the suspect heading into the forest. Surround the area. They chased him through the trees, beams of light slicing through the fog. The air was thick, cold, and filled with the sound of snapping branches. Emily caught sight of him again near the edge of the ridge, his figure ghost-like in the mist. He moved quickly, unnaturally silent for someone his age. "Stop!" she yelled. Price turned just long enough for her to see a faint smile before vanishing down a steep incline. She followed, sliding on the wet ground, catching herself on the exposed roots. The terrain grew rougher, the forest darker. Finally, the trees parted, and before her stood a cabin. It was small, hidden deep in the woods, half swallowed by moss and decay. The windows were boarded, the door barely hanging on its hinges. But faint light leaked through the cracks. Emily raised her gun and approached. "Hollow Creek Police. Step out with your hands where I can see them." No response. She pushed the door open. The smell hit her first: mildew, damp paper, and something metallic. The interior was lined floor to ceiling with photographs. Thousands of them. Every wall, every inch of the ceiling was covered in black and white prints. Faces frozen in moments of fear, sadness, confusion. Some were marked with dates, others had small, handwritten notes beneath them. In the center of the room stood a large wooden table, covered in rolls of film, open notebooks, and half-developed prints. "Dear God," Dana muttered as she stepped in behind Emily. "This is his studio," Emily whispered. "He's been developing his photos here." On the far side of the room, an old film projector was still running, its reels spinning lazily, casting ghostly flickers on the wall. The projection showed footage of Hollow Creek itself, fog rolling over the bridge, the forest paths, the townspeople going about their day, unaware they were being watched. "Look at this," Dana said, pointing to a set of recent photos pinned above the projector. Each image showed a sequence: Emily walking through the police station, talking to Dalton, standing at the bridge earlier that night. The final photo was time-stamped 2 minutes ago. "He's watching us right now," Emily whispered. They swept through the cabin room by room, but Price was nowhere to be found. Instead, they discovered something even more disturbing: a hidden staircase beneath a trapdoor leading down into the earth. Dalton joined them, shotgun in hand. "You ready for this?" Emily nodded, flicking on her flashlight. "Let's find out what he's been hiding." The stairs creaked under their weight as they descended into darkness. The air grew colder, damp with the smell of rot and chemicals. At the bottom, the tunnel opened into a narrow basement, a makeshift darkroom, lit by a single red bulb. Shelves of chemical jars lined the walls. Long tables held trays filled with photos floating in developer solution. But what drew Emily's eyes was the far wall, covered in Polaroids, all neatly arranged in a grid. Every face belonged to a known victim. Except one. In the center of the wall was a photograph of her. Emily Hart. She stared at it, her stomach dropping. Dalton stepped beside her. "He's obsessed with you," Dana whispered. "It's like he's been documenting your investigation." Emily reached up and touched the photo. "No. He's been leading me here. This is where he wanted me to end up." She noticed something else pinned beneath her photo, a map of Hollow Creek with markings forming a circle around the outskirts. Each burial site for the capsules was connected by thin red string. And right in the middle of the circle, one word was written: "Heart." Dalton muttered. "He's been building toward you this entire time." A loud creak above them made everyone freeze. Footsteps. "Upstairs," Dalton whispered. They moved quickly but quietly back toward the staircase, guns raised. The red bulb flickered once, twice, then went dark. Emily's pulse thundered in her ears. They emerged into the cabin's main room, flashlights darting through the gloom. "Price!" Emily shouted. "It's over! Come out!" From the shadows behind the table came a low chuckle. "You're wrong, Detective," Price's voice said softly. "It's only just beginning." He stepped into view, camera in hand, the flash poised. His expression was eerily calm, as though everything was unfolding exactly as he'd planned. "You've done beautifully," he said. "Following the trail, uncovering my work, bringing the eyes of the world to Hollow Creek. You've made me immortal. Emily raised her weapon. You're done making victims, Price? He smiled faintly. Oh, Emily, I'm not the one you should fear. Before she could react, he pressed a button on the camera. The flash went off again, blinding white. When her vision cleared, Price was gone, again. But this time, there was no door slamming, no footsteps. Just silence. And a faint humming sound. Dalton's beam swept across the room until it stopped on a small mechanical device attached to the underside of the table, a timer counting down from 0:30. Move! Emily screamed. It's a bomb! They dove for the door just as the explosion ripped through the cabin. The blast sent shards of wood and flame into the night, throwing them to the ground. Emily's ears rang as she scrambled up, coughing through the smoke. The cabin was a fireball, collapsing in on itself. Dalton! Dana! She shouted. I'm good. Dalton coughed, limping. Dana stumbled out of the brush, dazed but alive. But through the flames, a shape moved, walking slowly away from the wreckage. Samuel Price. Still alive. He turned briefly, his silhouette framed against the fire. The camera hung at his side. And before disappearing into the fog once more, he called out. Tomorrow's the final frame, Detective. Hours later, as dawn broke over Hollow Creek, the fire had been contained. The cabin was nothing but smoldering ash. Emily sat in the back of the ambulance, her face streaked with soot. Dana was beside her, silent, lost in thought. Dalton paced nearby, phone pressed to his ear as he coordinated with state authorities. When he returned, his face was grave. We've got reports of him being seen near the old observatory past Miller's Ridge. It's the only spot left inside the circle on his map. Emily nodded slowly. Then that's where he's going to finish it. Dana frowned. But why the observatory? Emily stared out toward the fog-shrouded hills. Because that's where Hollow Creek began. The first photos Samuel ever took, the ones that made him famous, were shot from up there. This isn't just about killing anymore. He's trying to immortalize his masterpiece. Dalton crossed his arms. Then we'll make sure he never gets the chance. Emily's eyes hardened. Tomorrow it ends. She looked down at the remains of the last capsule they'd recovered before the explosion. Somehow, the box had survived the blast, charred but intact. She turned it over in her hands, brushing away soot. The engraving on the bottom was almost melted away, but still legible. Final frame, observatory. That night, the fog rolled back into Hollow Creek heavier than ever. Every streetlight flickered. Every radio transmission crackled with static. It was as if the whole town was holding its breath. Emily sat alone in her car, parked near the base of the hill that led to the observatory. The forest loomed dark ahead. She loaded her weapon, checked her flashlight, and took one last breath. This ends tonight, she whispered. Her radio hissed softly. Detective Hart, Dalton's voice came through, faint but steady. We're in position. Whenever you're ready. Emily started the engine. The road twisted upward through the trees, the fog thickening with every turn. She could barely see the narrow beam of her headlights when the silhouette of the observatory finally emerged. A domed structure long abandoned, its telescope rusted and shattered. The door creaked open under her hand. Inside, the air was cold and still. And there, in the center of the room, illuminated by a single lantern, stood Samuel Price, camera poised on a tripod, aimed directly at her. Welcome, Detective Hart, he said, his voice calm, almost reverent. You made it. She raised her gun. It's over, Samuel. He smiled faintly. No, it's beginning. Tonight, we make the final image. Emily's eyes flicked to the walls, covered with photos of every victim, every crime scene, every capsule. And in the middle, blank and waiting, was an empty frame. The fog had never seemed so thick, nor Hollow Creek so quiet. The storm that had raged through the night had finally broken, leaving behind a silence that felt almost deliberate, like the town was holding its breath. Detective Aaron Mallory stood at the edge of the field where the last time capsule had been unearthed, the ground still soft and glistening with dew. In the pale dawn light, the small clearing looked ghostly. Yellow police tape fluttered lazily between trees. Technicians moved like phantoms through the mist, their gloves smeared with mud, their cameras flashing occasionally as they documented what had been found in the newest box. Inside it had been another roll of film. This time, however, the photos were different. When the negatives had been developed an hour earlier, Erin had stared at them in stunned disbelief. The images weren't of random townspeople or of soon-to-be victims. They were of her. A series of black and white shots, each one slightly closer, as if someone had been following her from a distance for weeks. The final image, grainy, out of focus, showed her bedroom window from the outside. The faint outline of her silhouette could be seen through the blinds. Someone had been watching her. And whoever they were, they had already buried the proof. Mallory, a voice called from behind her. It was Detective Reed, his jacket soaked from the wet grass. "You need to see this." She turned, her pulse spiking. Reed was holding a small metal tag, the kind used for labeling the contents of evidence bags. The writing was smudged, but she could still read it. Tomorrow, 7:12 a.m. Erin glanced at her watch. It was 6:41. Her heart began to pound. "Where did you find that?" "Inside the lid," Reed said. "Scratched on the underside. It's not paint, it's carved." "Tomorrow," she murmured. "Or maybe it means today." The box was dug up after midnight. They exchanged a glance heavy with realization. Whatever was going to happen, it was scheduled for less than half an hour from now. Reed's radio crackled. "Dispatch to all units, 911 call from a Mrs. Helen Wexler. Says she found someone outside her barn on Quarry Road, standing in the fog. Claims it looked like a woman." Erin's breath caught. The Wexler property was a mile from where the capsule was found. "Get the car," she said, already running toward the trailhead. The cruiser's tires spat mud as they tore down the winding road. The fog pressed in thickly, swallowing the world beyond the headlights. Erin's mind raced, every detail from the last few days colliding. The camera in Halpern's possession, the newspaper clippings, the old map of Hollow Creek with red X's marking the burial sites. Halpern was gone. His cabin burned to the ground hours earlier, nothing but charred beams left standing. But someone else was continuing the pattern. Reed was gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened. "You think he's alive?" "I think someone's finishing what he started," she said grimly. They reached the Wexler farm just as the first streaks of orange broke through the misty gray. Helen Wexler, wrapped in a shawl, stood near the gate trembling. "She's out there," the old woman whispered. "By the pond. She's just standing there." Erin and Reed exchanged a quick look before heading down the path. The wet grass clung to their boots, the air cold and metallic. As they approached the pond, a shape emerged through the haze. A slender figure in a white coat, her hair damp, her back turned. "Ma'am?" Erin called out. "Are you okay?" The woman didn't move. Reed took a cautious step forward, his hand on his holster. The fog drifted aside for just a second, and Erin's stomach dropped. It wasn't a woman. It was a mannequin. A camera was strapped to its neck, and dangling from the lens was a tag that read, "Frame 10. Back at the station, the film from the mannequin's camera was developed immediately. There were 10 photos. Each one was time-stamped, each one taken from a fixed point. Someone had set up the camera to take pictures automatically, one every 30 seconds. The first few frames showed the fog rolling over the pond. The next captured Erin and Reed approaching. And in the 10th, final frame, barely visible through the mist, was the silhouette of a man standing in the tree line, camera raised, watching them. "Son of a," Reed muttered. Erin leaned closer. The man's outline was familiar, short hair, heavy coat, broad shoulders. But his face was turned away. Reed looked at her. "He was there, Mallory. Right there while we were investigating." Her jaw tightened. "He's escalating. He wants us to see him now." The captain entered the room, his expression grim. "We just got a report from county records. You'll want to sit down for this." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were the blueprints of Hollow Creek's original community center, long demolished, but the name on the purchase record caught her eye. Calvin Marin. Erin frowned. "Marin? The photographer? He died years ago." "Apparently not." the captain said. He disappeared. Never confirmed dead. His studio was out on Route 9, not far from Halperin's old cabin. Reed exhaled slowly. You think they were working together? Or maybe one was following in the other's footsteps, Aaron said. The final frame flashed again on the monitor. The silhouette seemed to be looking directly into the lens now, through the fog and into the present. She couldn't shake the feeling he was watching still. By afternoon, Aaron and Reed were on Route 9. The road was narrow, bordered by skeletal trees. The remains of the old Marin photography studio sat back from the road, a collapsing wooden structure with a faded sign swinging weakly in the wind. Inside, it smelled of mildew and rot. Shelves were lined with yellowed negatives, film canisters, and jars of developer fluid turned cloudy with age. A rusted enlarger sat in the corner, still aimed at a cracked sheet of paper. Reed pointed to a wall covered in photographs. These are all from the same angle. Each photo captured the same patch of forest, but at different times of day, in different seasons. And in every shot, faintly visible, was a small mound of earth. A burial site. There were dozens of them. Aaron's stomach turned. He was documenting each box. Every time capsule. Then she saw it, a fresh photograph tacked to the corner. It wasn't yellowed. It wasn't old. It showed her car parked outside the Hollow Creek Police Department. Reed swore under his breath. He's been inside town. Recently. A sound creaked overhead. Both detectives froze. Aaron drew her weapon silently, motioning toward the staircase leading to the loft. Dust sifted down through the slats. They climbed carefully, each step groaning underfoot. At the top was a small room lit by a single bare bulb. A table sat in the center, covered in photographs and maps. A large calendar was pinned to the wall, the dates crossed off in red marker. Tomorrow's date, October 12th, was circled. Under it, written in thick black ink, were 3 words. The final frame. Reed's radio buzzed, shattering the silence. Detective Mallory, we've got something at your house. You need to come quick. Aaron's heart stopped. My house? Yeah. Another box. Right on your porch. By the time they arrived, the street was crawling with patrol cars. Neighbors had gathered at their windows, whispering. The wooden box sat on Aaron's front step, identical to the others but cleaner, newer. Reed crouched beside it. You ready? She nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. They lifted the lid. Inside was a single Polaroid. The photo showed Aaron standing exactly where she was now, on her porch, looking down at the open box. The timestamp, 7:12 a.m. Her breath caught in her throat. That was the time carved into the tag. Reed looked around the neighborhood, scanning rooftops and windows. He's close, Mallory. He's got to be watching. She swallowed hard, every instinct screaming. He's not predicting anymore. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He's controlling the frames. And somewhere beyond the tree line, through the dense morning fog, a faint click echoed. The sound of a camera shutter. The shutter click lingered in Aaron Mallory's ears like a ghost. She froze on her porch, the Polaroid still trembling in her hands, the image of herself staring back, caught mid-breath, her eyes wide with the same terror she felt now. Reed was already shouting orders, radioing for backup to canvass the surrounding houses. But Aaron didn't hear him. Her gaze was locked on the photo, and on the faint reflection visible in the window behind her image. A human silhouette, standing in the fog. The reflection was behind her. Reed, she shouted, spinning around. But there was no one. Only mist, thick and rolling through the trees, the dawn light filtering through in thin streaks of silver. The neighborhood looked almost dreamlike, too still, too silent. Reed rushed to her side. He's playing with us. He wants you rattled. He's already got that, Aaron said, forcing her breath steady. We've got less than an hour before this turns into another box in the dirt. Reed frowned. What do you mean? She turned the Polaroid over. Scrawled on the back, in messy black ink, were the words. The exposure ends at 8. It was 7:22. They moved fast, sweeping through the street, checking yards, sheds and rooftops. Every window seemed to hold eyes. The residents of Hollow Creek, so used to quiet isolation, now watched in muted panic as police flooded the block. Erin couldn't shake the feeling she was being pulled into something choreographed. Every photo, every clue, it all led her here. But why her? As she passed a row of mailboxes, she saw it. A black envelope taped to her car door. Her name written across it in white chalk. Inside was a folded photograph, the edges still damp from developer fluid. It showed the old Marin photography studio, but in the picture, it wasn't abandoned. The windows glowed with light. A figure stood inside, holding a camera. Erin's blood ran cold. "He's there," she whispered. "He's gone back." By the time they reached the old studio, the sky was the color of bruised steel. Fog crept low along the ground, and the wooden structure loomed ahead like a carcass. Reed cut the engine and turned to her. "We go in together. No hero moves, got it?" Erin nodded, though her gut told her this would end only one way. Inside, the air was heavy with chemical fumes. A faint red light glowed from the far room, the dark room. The smell of developing fluid and metal was sharp, almost nauseating. On the table lay a Polaroid camera, still warm, and pinned to the wall above it were dozens of new photos, freshly printed, curling at the edges. Each one showed Erin and Reed entering the building. Reed's voice dropped. These were just taken. Erin's eyes moved to the far end of the room, where a door stood slightly ajar. A flickering bulb swung above it, casting long, stuttering shadows. They approached slowly, weapons drawn. "Police!" Reed called. "Come out with your hands up." No response. Erin pushed the door open. The room beyond was small, lined with mirrors. It took her a moment to realize what she was seeing. Photos tacked to every surface, thousands of them, overlapping until the walls disappeared. Every image was of Hollow Creek. Every face in town. School portraits, wedding photos, driver's licenses, surveillance stills. And in the center of the room stood a man in a long coat, his head tilted as he adjusted an old camera on a tripod. The flashbulb gleamed dully under the swaying light. "Detective Mallory," he said without turning. His voice was calm, almost polite. "You made it just in time." Erin raised her weapon. "Step away from the camera." "I will," he said, "once the frame is complete." Reed moved closer, circling to the side. "You're Marin." The man chuckled softly. "That's one name I've had, yes. But I've worn many faces. Calvin Marin was only the beginning." He turned then, and Erin's stomach twisted. It was him, the silhouette from the final frame. The same face she'd glimpsed years ago in an old crime scene photo from Halpern's files. But older now, worn thin, eyes gleaming with something unhinged yet measured. "You were his partner," she said quietly. "Halpern didn't work alone." Marin smiled faintly. "Partner? No, detective. I was his subject. He took the pictures. I learned what they meant." Erin frowned, keeping her gun steady. What they meant? He spread his arms, motioning to the walls. "Every photo captures a moment that will never happen again. But what if you could choose which moments stay? What if you could frame them, decide what exists?" Reed scoffed. "You're insane." Marin ignored him, lifting the camera slightly. "Do you know what happens when light hits film? Chemical reaction. Simple, beautiful, permanent. The moment burns itself into memory. That's all I ever wanted, to burn away the noise." Erin's jaw tightened. "You murdered people for your art." He tilted his head. "No. I preserved them." Suddenly, the flash went off. Erin blinked hard, disoriented. Marin was gone. "Reed!" she shouted. A door slammed somewhere deeper in the building. They ran through a narrow hallway, their footsteps echoing on the warped floorboards. The path led down into a basement, a low, concrete space lit only by the flickering bulb of an old enlarger. The smell of chemicals grew stronger, and on a makeshift table sat another wooden box. Reed hesitated. That wasn't here before. Erin approached it slowly. The lid was unmarked, but she knew what was inside. When she opened it, she found a single sheet of glossy photographic paper still damp with developer. The image hadn't fully formed yet. Reed leaned closer. What is it? The picture darkened. Shadows bled into shape. It was them. Standing in the basement. Right now. Reed swore under his breath. He's printing the moment we're living. And then Erin saw it. The faint shape behind them, in the photograph's background. Marin. She spun around. He was there. Camera raised. The flash exploded again, blinding white. When Erin's vision cleared, Reed was on the ground, coughing. Marin stood over him, camera dangling from his neck, the glint of something metallic in his other hand, a small, silver scalpel. Stay back! Erin shouted. He smiled faintly. You can't stop the exposure, detective. It's already begun. She fired once, the bullet grazing his shoulder. He staggered back, hitting the table. The chemicals spilled, hissing across the floor. Reed lunged, tackling him. The scalpel clattered away, but Marin clawed for the camera, his hands trembling with fury. You don't understand, it's the final frame. It has to end this way. Erin grabbed the camera strap and yanked hard. It snapped free, and with it the film cartridge popped open, spilling a series of undeveloped shots across the wet concrete. Marin screamed, scrambling after them. You ruined it. You ruined everything. The spilled chemicals caught the exposed film, sizzling as they reacted. The images began to darken, bubbling away into nothingness. Erin pointed her gun again, voice steady. It's over. He looked up at her, eyes wild. You can't stop what's already been captured. The chemical fumes ignited with a low whump. Flames licked across the table, swallowing the photos, the negatives, the paper. Reed pulled Erin back as the fire raced toward the walls. Marin didn't move. He just stared at the burning prints, a strange peace crossing his face. Every frame must fade, he whispered. The ceiling groaned, and then collapsed. Hours later, Hollow Creek was waking up to sirens and smoke. Fire crews battled the blaze that had devoured the old studio, leaving little more than ash and twisted metal. Reed sat on the bumper of an ambulance, a bandage wrapped around his arm. Erin stood beside him, watching as the ruins smoldered. They'd found no body in the wreckage. No trace of Marin. Only the melted remains of cameras. You think he made it out? Reed asked quietly. Erin didn't answer. Her mind was still on the Polaroid that had started it all, the one found on her porch. When they'd returned to the scene, it was gone. Reed sighed. If he's alive, he won't stop. No, she said softly, but neither will I. She looked out at the rising sun, the fog breaking apart like thin smoke. For the first time in days, the air felt clear. But somewhere deep in the woods, beyond where the fire trucks and police lights could reach, a faint glimmer caught the dawn. A small wooden box, half buried beneath the roots of an old oak. Inside, untouched by flame, was a single photograph. It showed Erin Mallory standing by the ashes of the studio. On the back, written in neat handwriting,